Hello and welcome to the African Tech Roundup, episode 116. Now, this is where we round up the most important tech, digital and innovation highlights from across the African continent. My name is Andile Masuku and Happy New Year to you all. Now, it's rather unfortunate that for the first show of 2018, I don't have with me my partner on the show, the Zambian sensation that is Musa Kalenga. Well, there's really quite a simple reason for that. He's not here. Well, he's not here with me, folks, but in the interest of full disclosure, well, we actually did meet to record the episode a couple of days ago and ended up spending the better part of 3 hours just catching up and plotting for the year ahead. Lots of interesting things Musa has on his plate from the standpoint of him being a startup founder, of course, an investing founder, as it were, and then, of course, his involvement here at African Tech Roundup set to expand in the coming year. Lots of interesting news and developments around this platform that we'll be looking forward to sharing with you in the coming weeks. I will not spoil that news. I'll definitely wait for him to be back on the mic with me to let you know what we have in mind. But that said, I'm really glad to be back on the show. Hosting this show remains one of the most enjoyable things I do with my young life, and so thank you for joining me. This will be a show with a difference. I'll be letting you into my head a little bit in terms of, what's trending, what's sort of top of mind at the beginning of the year as I look back on 2017 and look forward to 2018. Themes that I hope to explore in the coming year, issues I'd like to interrogate or perhaps understand better. All of that's coming up a little later on in what's really going to be a fairly unscripted episode. I hope you'll stay with me. But first, let's do this. This episode of the African Tech Roundup is brought to you by the Africa Tech Summit Kigali. Now, that's happening in Rwanda on the 14th and 15th of February 2018. The conference, which of course is supported by Rwanda's Ministry for ICT, promises to offer useful insights and top-drawer networking and business opportunities for local and international tech leaders and investors who want to drive growth right here on the African continent. Now, African Tech Roundup is quite pleased to be one of the media partners at Africa Tech Summit Kigali, and we look forward to having you join us in taking in a host of keynotes, breakout sessions, and networking events, which will explore the latest tech and innovation trends and help you connect with over 250 tech and innovation ecosystem players from across Africa and indeed the world. And so here's what you need to do. Head straight to africatechsummit.com to book yourself a seat before the early bird special ends on January 19th. That's africatechsummit.com. And of course, while you're there, be sure to check out the dope list of speakers booked to attend, and of course, take a squiz at the program itself. Now, it really should be a great time. We look forward to seeing you there. I suppose it's worth mentioning as well that some of us are planning to catch some drinks at the Marriott Kigali's Iriba Bar between 4:30 p.m. and 6 p.m. on February the 13th, which is the day before the conference. So yeah, if you're flying into Kigali early, do swing around and say, hey, we'll be, downstairs at the Iriba Bar at the Marriott Kigali, again, between around 4:30 p.m. and 6 p.m. Do come through and say, hey. Then, of course, in terms of the conference itself, I'm facilitating a panel at the event. I'll definitely be taping interviews for African Tech Roundup throughout the event. So it'll be busy, but what's not to look forward to? In terms of what's trending in my life right now, I spent a week in Zimbabwe over, the festive period, the week over Christmas, to be specific. I've been getting quite a few questions from people who've seen me since going, what's Zim like, given all the, the political, changes that have been taking place over the last while, the quote unquote non-coup that's seen us see the first change in presidency since independence in 1980. I guess, it doesn't really have anything to do with tech and innovation or the emerging tech ecosystem, as it were, but it's certainly my being a Zimbabwean, my being home and taking in the fairly dramatic changes in scenery, as it were, in political terms in Zimbabwe has been a big part of my psyche of late. And yeah, I thought, it's worth mentioning that fairly hopeful that the country is about to usher in a season of change. And I'm not naive to the challenges or some of the problematic legacy issues at play. I won't go into them, but I suppose I feel this is all worth bringing up because, context is everything. And beginning to appreciate the reality for various, founders, investors, policymakers across the continent is so vastly different. As a Zimbabwean who tapes the show and basically asserts his career from South Africa, even just how unique, the context and needs from a sort of innovation or even digital transformation standpoint are from country to country, even with Zimbabwe and South Africa being in such close proximity. I'd be curious to know what you guys did with your holiday and what sort of observations you made in terms of where our continent is going, how the countries you're from are doing, and whether they're poised to grow. I know the World Bank and others have projected that 2018 ought to be pretty good for sub-Saharan Africa. I've heard quite a few people quite positive about the potential of the region. And so, I don't know what your sense of taking in the continent. Did you holiday on the continent? Did you go abroad and perhaps get a sense of how we're doing from the perspective of being outside the continent? I'd love to know. Give us a shout at African Roundup on Twitter and Instagram. On Facebook, we have facebook.com/African Tech Roundup. And of course, if you'd like to email us, do so via hello@africantechroundup.com. Then it's worth drawing your attention to some of the more recent interviews we've published on the africantechroundup.com platform. One of the ones that stand out probably is the most recent one we published, an interview I had with a gentleman named Bert Bruggeman of Gafira Solutions, a Silicon Valley-based technology advisory firm. Now, Bert has an impressive 25-year track record of successful technology product development and C-suite experience in a broad range of high-tech industries. And I caught up with him at the Africa Angel Investor Summit late last year to have a conversation with him about the role that hardware ought to be playing in the digital transformation narrative for the African continent. One of the things that stuck with me in my conversation with him is his understanding and belief that Africa can't app its way to solving all its problems, and that there needs to be a much more balanced approach to thinking about problem solving in as far as, the software applications we can deploy, as well as the hardware that needs to accompany it or indeed complement it. So, that was a really good conversation that's worth listening to. Some of the other conversations that are top of mind for me involve venture capital, which I've been thinking about quite a fair bit recently, not least because on the last show, Musa and I hosted for 2017, we were lucky enough to have on the show as a guest a certain Rushil Valab, who is a Bain consultant turned venture capitalist. He's also part of the founding team at Secha Capital. And we spent a little bit of time getting his take on why he believes that his organization's, quote unquote, hybrid model gives them the edge. And he, of course, factored in on the pros and cons of some of the angel investment and VC approaches that we've discussed on the show in recent months. It's got me thinking, will the real VC please stand up? Because, there seems to be quite a lot of debate about the most appropriate ways to deploy venture capital on the continent, hybrid models that hope to take the best of the PE scene, venture capital, angel investors who have their own idea about what it takes to start funds. I happened upon this really cool quote by the American startup founder Jason Higgins, which I think is quite helpful. Now, this is what he had to say: venture capital is rocket fuel. It's not useful if you're not building a rocket, and VCs only want to give rocket fuel to rocket builders. Regardless, rocket fuel is dangerous and difficult to handle properly. VCs will be angry if you end up burning that rocket fuel building a car or a plane instead of a rocket, no matter how awesome the car or plane that you build is, because they promised their investors, LPs that is, that they would only invest in rockets. But if you've clearly built a rocket, perhaps after years of bootstrapping, and it's now obvious that you can reach orbit, if only you had enough fuel, then venture capital, or of course rocket fuel, might make sense. Now, this is of course a gentleman who plies his trade as a founder in the robotics sphere within Silicon Valley. And of course, these are some of the ideas that filter into our ecosystem as, what VC is out to achieve and what it's set out to do. And of course, there are all sorts of debates about how much of that sort of thinking is applicable to our context, this desire to sort of back ideas that either have the potential to grow super fast or scale really quickly, or become, profitable beyond belief, might be one that Africa might do well to sidestep in favor of something else a little more suited to the continent's needs. That said, in terms of some of the people that I feel are getting it right, a certain Khalid Ismail is the chairman and founder of two Cairo-based angel funds, the KI Angel and Him Angel. He also serves as an advisor to Algebra Ventures, which is Egypt's leading technology venture capital outfit. And, in a conversation I had with him recently, he related how he went from being a career technologist to founding, 7 tech ventures since 1991, which includes a 4G mobile tech firm, which was acquired by Intel. By his own admission, he accidentally fell into structured angel investing activities. And so in the conversation I had with him, he explained how he's acting on this sort of idealistic desire to tear down trade barriers that are linked to Africa's colonial past. He seems quite determined to normalize the interchange of both angel funding and startup founding talent across the continent. And I quite like the way he's going about his business, not least because he takes a very hands-on approach, spending a fair bit of time in the trenches with his investees and allowing them to sort of benefit directly from his knowledge, his network, and indeed his abilities. And I feel whatever the model we might think of as being ideal for the continent in terms of VC and its deployment, I do believe that a hands-on approach is essential, and I look forward to spending the next year, interrogating this issue more in terms of who's getting it right, perhaps assessing market to market what, the appropriate VC approaches might be, what sort of hybrid models, we might need to deploy, the role of angel investors, angel investment syndicates in ensuring that we start to create a pipeline of serious value that we can all look back on 5 years from now and think, wow, we did that. And so, one other conversation I had recently that I'd like to highlight that's sort of top of mind for me is one with Msurvey's Kenfield Griffith. Now, he's the firm's co-founder and the CEO. It's, Msurvey is a data analytics SaaS startup. It's based in Nairobi, Kenya. And Kenfield actually launched the business with the Kenyan Louis Majanja. He was in Nairobi in 2012, trying to finish off his PhD on the use of technology as a means to improving communication. And the business was born out of some of the pain points that he experienced in terms of accessing the appropriate data he needed to complete his MIT PhD. Now, in my conversation with Kenfield, because it was the first conversation I had for the year, I got him to explain why he's pretty bullish about 2018. He's not alone, of course, as I mentioned earlier. But I also just got him to speak about the trend towards data analytics, helping enterprise large and small deliver solid business results right here on the continent, in the US and the Caribbean, where Msurvey operates. And so, as a trend to sort of look out for in 2018, we've been speaking about big data for years now. It almost feels fairly 2012 at this point, but for the continent where there continues to be a dearth of actionable data and more importantly, actionable insight that is derived from, crunching data to provide, intelligence, is definitely an area to keep an eye on. And so, listen, I've just mentioned 3 or 4 of some of the conversations I've had recently that sort of stand out to me as I'm poised to take on 2018. You can find them all at africantechroundup.com. Just head to the Quick Tech Chats playlist, dig in and get yourself up to speed. And while we're on the point of podcatchers. A big shout out to the folks at Player FM, which is, of course, a leading Android podcast platform. Shout out to Player FM for rating our flagship podcast one of the best South Africa podcasts for 2018. We just happened upon that pretty cool affirmation that they gave us. You can start listening to the African Tech Roundup podcast on your mobile today with Player FM's free Android app. Just find it in your app store and go ahead and listen. Of course, we're available everywhere else, but a special shout out to Player FM for, punting our hustle and really just recognizing the work we do here. And then, just really in terms of wrapping up this fairly unstructured, walk through the annals of my mind, I'm leading you all on. Like many of you, over the holidays, I had the opportunity to catch up on some reading. There's an article I happened upon on LinkedIn I found quite provocative, and I thought it was worth sharing with all of you. It's by a certain Sei Fabode, and it's entitled, "Is It Time to Dump the Lean Startup Approach?" Let me read you a little snippet from this piece. This is what Fabode says. He says, "Since we're reconsidering the value of venture capital in a world where a startup can raise millions on an ICO white paper written by a freelancer on Fiverr," cheeky, why don't we also assess the continued value of the lean startup methodology and all the baggage it brought with it? I've always had a gripe with how the venture capital community and, say, for the Elon Musk type founders, now lack any conviction about solving any true problems. Founders are starting businesses every day, but the system is now set up for them to only focus on solving problems that can be validated by focusing on the lowest points of average. I totally relate to his frustration. Again, linking it to, my recent visit home over the holiday in Zimbabwe, looking at some of the bigger problems that Zimbabwe as a country might be looking to solve over the next couple of months and years, even decades. One can't help but appreciate the fact that a lot of those problems require a certain mindset that is not embodied in the lean startup approach. And without going into it, I think it's just worth you Googling the article to have a look at it. We shared it on our social media platforms. You're welcome to catch it there on our Twitter or Facebook. But it's certainly quite a provocative article that got me thinking, what's worth focusing on, even in terms of the values and methodologies that we encourage founding talent on the continent to adopt in order to work their way to startup success. Is the lean startup approach this infallible methodology that everyone should be using in order to answer our questions? Well, Sei is not so sure, and neither am I, frankly. So I don't know what you think. Have a look at the article. It's called "Is It Time to Dump the Lean Startup Approach?" You should be able to find it quite easily if you Google either the title or the author, Sei Fabode. And give us a shout and let us know what you think at African Roundup, or drop us an email via hello@africantechroundup.com. And so finally, a quick update on the hashtag #NotOurManifesto farce that basically trended on social media in the final quarter of 2018. You might recall Co-Creation Hub Nigeria's co-founder Femi Longe factoring in on the very problematic quote-unquote collaborative document entitled "Startups for Africa Manifesto for the Development of a Thriving Community of African European Startup Ecosystems." It was a paper presented at the recent EU-Africa Summit, and of course Femi just could not keep his pen still after he returned to Nigeria, following the event. And of course, it caused quite a stir in social media, as I mentioned earlier. And of course, following the outrage, the response was fairly constructive. Now, the folks behind the report, Startup Europe, reached out to Femi and assured him that there would be correcting many of the problematic aspects of that document, not least the fact that it wasn't sufficiently collaborative. It certainly did not rope in the input and insights of ecosystem players on the continent. And while we can't speak for whether or not, European ecosystem players were in fact consulted on the process, we can be pretty sure that Africa was pretty much left out in the process. The document itself was just littered with oversimplifications and bias, and we reached out to its authors, who initially said they would speak to us and actually come onto the show, and then later change their minds. And then through Femi, a dozen of us odd were rounded up in order to be addressed by Startup Europe, which did happen over a very shoddy group call that was arranged. It's all been very, very frustrating and disheartening. So one of the positive things to come out of this whole fiasco is something called africamanifesto.com, which is a platform that Femi Longa has since established to help us all as tech ecosystem players on the continent start to contribute towards what we consider vital for the ecosystem to thrive and to position itself to engage with stakeholders from other parts of the world who are looking to create and extract value from our continent. And let's support this initiative. Perhaps 2018 might be the year where we finally get our act together. It has to be said that a vacuum must exist if the likes of Startup Europe, take it upon themselves to do things like this. And the last thing I'd like to do as a means of kicking off 2018 on the show is encourages you all to visit africamanifesto.com. There are already dozens of contributions in terms of insights, suggestions, comments that have already landed on the platform. Add your voice to it so that we can make something useful of this platform where Africa reps itself to the max. And yeah, so that really just wraps up this pretty unscripted introduction to the year. In the year ahead, you can look forward to us publishing more incredible content as we did throughout 2017. That's more of the African Tech Roundup podcast episodes, more quick tech chats podcasts that feature Africa-focused innovators, that's founders, policymakers, investors, all in their own way moving the needle for Africa's tech ecosystem. And you can look forward to us continuing to publish op-eds at least bi-monthly in places like Business Report and African Independent Magazine. And then, of course, there are other exciting developments regarding this brand and our plans to bring our vibe to your city. We'll be sharing more on that in the coming weeks. In the meantime, though, thank you for sticking with us. We look forward to an incredible year ahead. And then, of course, a big thank you to Africa Tech Summit Kigali, who, of course, are sponsors for this particular episode. We look forward to rubbing shoulders with you at Africa Tech Summit Kigali. It's happening in Rwanda on the 14th and 15th of February 2018. We're quite pleased, of course, to be one of the media partners at this year's event, and we look forward to the keynotes, the breakout sessions, and networking events that'll help us all explore the latest tech and innovation trends, and also allow at least 250 tech and innovation ecosystem players drawn from across the continent and other parts of the world to connect. So once again, here's what you need to do to make sure your seat is secured for the event. Head straight to africatechsummit.com. There's an early bird special that ends on January 19th. So if I were you, I'd get it done before then. It's africatechsummit.com. And while you're there, check out the growing list of speakers who are booked to attend. It's looking pretty good. And it all round should be a great time. And then again, it's worth reminding you that a bunch of us are getting together for Sundowners the evening before the actual event. That's on February 13th. Between about 4:30 p.m. and 6 p.m. We'll be at the Marriott Kigali's Iriba Bar, just chatting, trading notes, all that good stuff. I look forward to having you swing by if you're in Kigali early, so we can get the vibe right before the conference even gets started. Yep. And so that's it for this episode. All things being equal, Musa will be back on the mic with me for the next one. Yeah, otherwise, once again, wishing you all the very best for 2018 Africa. As always, do take care.